There's a type of betrayal that doesn't happen in the shadows of the night, but under the cold lights of the office, amidst forced smiles and calculated handshakes. It's the kind that disguises itself as camaraderie, hiding behind cordial meetings and shared coffees. When a colleague decides to destroy another to climb the corporate ladder, they don't just break trust, they reveal who they really are when no one is looking. And what's most disturbing is that these people walk among us every day, sit next to us, share lunches with us, while meticulously planning our downfall. Have you ever wondered what drives someone to deliberately sabotage a colleague's career? And more importantly, does that person truly believe they will get away with it, that their actions will remain hidden forever? The answer to the first question is almost always the same: a toxic mix of envy, insecurity, and unbridled ambition, the kind that corrodes from within, transforming a human being into something less than they should be. It's the inability to accept that the success of others doesn't diminish our own, that there's room for everyone to grow without needing to bring anyone down. As for the second question, the story you're about to hear shows that no, the truth has a peculiar way of emerging even when buried under layers of well-constructed lies. Because in the end, corporate betrayal leaves traces, digital traces, emotional traces, traces that eventually lead back to the traitor. And when those traces are followed by someone with keen eyes and moral courage, the whole house of cards collapses. Marcelo was 42 years old when everything began to crumble around him. 20 years dedicated to the same company, climbing step by step with the patience of someone who believes in honest work. He was a project manager at a multinational technology company, respected by his team, known for his ability to solve complex problems with a calmness that reassured even the most demanding clients. His mornings always began the same way. He arrived at the office at 7:30, half an hour before everyone else, prepared his coffee in the blue thermal mug his daughter had given him for his 40th birthday, and reviewed the day's tasks while the sun was still rising over the city. There was something comforting about this routine, a sense of control amidst the chaos that defined the technology market. Marcelo enjoyed that half hour of silence before the office woke up, when he could think clearly, plan strategies, anticipate problems. It was his time for age-old meditation, his ritual of preparation for another day of challenges. But what Marcelo didn't know was that his routine was being observed, studied, and documented by someone very close to him. His teammate, Rafael, 35 years old, ambitious to the core, saw in Marcelo not a mentor, but an obstacle. Rafael had joined the company only 3 years earlier, bringing with him the typical energy of someone who still needs to prove their worth. At first, he seemed like just another competent professional eager to grow. He actively participated in meetings, offered ideas, and stayed late when necessary. Marcelo even commented to Fernanda, his wife, that he liked the young man's dedication. "He reminds me of myself 15 years ago," he said one night during dinner. If he had known what Rafael really thought during those hallway conversations, those shared coffees, those meetings where he pretended to take notes on Marcelo's advice, he would have felt a chill down his spine. Because Rafael didn't see a generous mentor there. He saw a man occupying the position he believed he deserved. Not because he was more prepared or had more experience, but simply because he believed he deserved everything he desired, and he was willing to do whatever it took to get it. Absolutely everything. The first signs were too subtle for Marcelo to notice. An important email that didn't arrive on time. A project file that mysteriously contained errors he was sure he had corrected the night before. Meetings with clients where crucial information he had shared with the team simply didn't appear in the final reports, making him seem disorganized or, worse, forgetful. Marcelo attributed everything to system failures, work overload, the small slips that happen in any fast-paced corporate environment. He wasn't the type of person who saw conspiracy everywhere. He trusted people until they gave him concrete reason to distrust them. This was his life philosophy, inherited from his father, a simple man who had worked for 40 years in the same factory, and always said, "Son, if you start life suspecting everyone, you'll end up alone and bitter." Marcelo took these words seriously, and this trust, this fundamental belief in the goodness of others, would be exactly what Rafael would masterfully exploit. For months, Rafael crafted his trap with the precision of a craftsman. Each small act of sabotage was carefully planned to appear as Marcelo's mistake. A missed deadline here, a dissatisfied client there, a budget that overruns without apparent explanation. Rafael knew exactly how the system worked. Every loophole, every blind spot in the supervision. He spent hours studying the company's processes, not to improve his work, but to identify vulnerabilities. He knew which emails passed through spam filters most frequently. He knew the times when automatic backups ran. He understood the hierarchy of permissions in the shared system. And most importantly, he knew how to present himself as the perfect solution to the problems he himself created. He was a master of corporate manipulation, the kind of person who transforms offices into invisible battlefields. Rafael's true mastery lay in his performance. While systematically sabotaging Marcelo, he presented himself as his biggest supporter. He constantly offered help, always with that concerned smile of someone who genuinely cares. He stayed late helping to resolve crises he himself had provoked, gaining points with management for his extraordinary dedication. He brought Marcelo coffee on the most difficult days, saying things like, "We're in this together, and you can always count on me." This duplicity was so convincing that even Marcelo, in his most stressful moments, internally thanked him for having such a supportive colleague. Once, after a particularly difficult meeting with a client, Rafael put his hand on Marcelo's shoulder and said, "You're the best manager I've ever had. I will carry your teachings with me forever." Marcelo felt his eyes welling up at that moment, touched by the apparent sincerity. He didn't see that behind those eyes lay calculated coldness, a moral void that allowed Rafael to say anything that was convenient without feeling a shred of remorse. Rafael even cried once, on a Friday night when they were alone in the office, saying he admired Marcelo more than any other professional he had ever known. He said he came from a humble family, that he had never had positive leadership role models, that Marcelo was the professional father he never had. Those tears were fake, each word carefully chosen to create an emotional connection that would make any future suspicion impossible. But Marcelo had no way of knowing. He hugged Rafael at that moment, felt the younger man's body tremble against his shoulder, said that together they would overcome any challenge, that the company was lucky to have professionals like him. And Rafael, while pretending to be comforted, while murmuring stifled thanks, coldly thought about the next steps of his plan. He calculated deadlines, anticipated moves, planned the final move that would make Marcelo's downfall inevitable. He was a fully functioning corporate sociopath, and Marcelo was his completely defenseless target. The pressure on Marcelo mounted week after week, like water slowly filling a sealed container. The board began questioning his performance in executive meetings. Projects he had led for years now seemed to be constantly on the verge of collapse, always needing last-minute intervention. Important clients complained of lack of communication, missed deadlines, and substandard deliverables they had never experienced before with Marcelo. Each complaint was a small stab in the back of his carefully built reputation, constructed over 2 decades. Marcelo worked 16 hours a day trying to understand what was happening. He reviewed every process, every email, every spreadsheet. He began compulsively making lists, creating triple-checking systems, waking up at 3 a.m. with his heart racing, convinced he had forgotten something crucial. His wife, Fernanda, noticed how he arrived home exhausted, with deep dark circles under his eyes that aged his face 5 years, eating poorly and sleeping even worse. She tried to talk to him, prepared his favorite dishes, suggested they take a weekend to rest. But Marcelo only said that he was going through a difficult phase at work, that everything would be resolved soon. He didn't want to worry her more than necessary. He didn't know how to explain that he felt he was losing the ability to do what he had always done with excellence. It was as if 20 years of expertise were evaporating, as if his brain was betraying his experience. He began to doubt himself, to question whether he wasn't really losing his touch, whether 20 years of career hadn't finally taken their toll. Maybe it was age, he thought. Maybe younger people like Rafael were really better adapted to the current pace of the market. Maybe it was time to accept that his time at the top had passed. At night, lying in bed unable to sleep, listening to Fernanda's soft breathing beside him, Marcelo wondered if he shouldn't simply give up. Resign before it was too late, before his reputation was completely destroyed. His 12-year-old daughter had asked him that Sunday why he didn't play with her anymore. "You're always tired, Dad." The words hurt more than any professional criticism. Meanwhile, Rafael flourished like a poisonous plant in fertile soil. In meetings with the board, he offered to take on extra responsibilities, always subtly highlighting the problems in Marcelo's projects while presenting brilliant solutions. He never attacked Marcelo directly. That would be too foolish, easily identifiable as sabotage. Instead, he asked seemingly innocent questions that planted doubts like toxic seeds. Isn't Marcelo overloaded? Perhaps we need to redistribute some responsibilities to help him. I would be happy to take on the Anderson project, for example. Or, I'm afraid Marcelo might be feeling too pressured. How about I temporarily take over the Davidson account just to lighten his load? I know he values this client a lot, but sometimes you have to put your pride aside and accept help. The board saw in Rafael a concerned, proactive professional, ready to grow, exactly the type of talent that companies want to retain and promote. What they didn't see was the poison distilled behind each carefully chosen word, each gesture of feigned concern, each poisoned offer of help. Rafael's final move was orchestrated with calculated coldness. He needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be attributed to coincidence or overload. He needed a failure so big, so public, so indefensible, that Marcelo's dismissal would seem not only justifiable, but necessary. And he found his opportunity in Project Titan, the biggest contract the company had closed that year, a giant corporate client that could open doors to new multimillion-dollar deals. It was the kind of project that defines careers, that appears in annual reports, that directors mention at conferences, the perfect project to weaponize. Marcelo was the lead manager of the Titan project. 3 months of intensive preparation, dozens of strategic meetings, a team of 15 people working intensely to deliver something perfect. Rafael wasn't part of the core team, but he had access to the systems because he was in the same division. And it was in this seemingly innocent access that he found his weapon. For weeks, he observed the team's work patterns, memorized schedules, studied who accessed which files and when. He patiently waited for the perfect opportunity. The night before the final presentation to the client, when everyone had already left exhausted after days of final revisions, Rafael returned to the office. He signed the entry register, telling the security guard that he had forgotten important documents. There were no cameras on that specific floor. He had already checked this weeks before, casually asking the security personnel about blind spots, under the pretext of concern for employee privacy. Calmly, seated at the same workstation he used every day, Rafael accessed the shared server and located the final presentation for the Titan project. It consisted of 120 slides, months of work condensed into data, graphs, and strategic proposals. For a moment, just a very brief moment, with his mouse over the file, Rafael wondered if it was worth it. If that moment wasn't a point of no return, a leap into a moral abyss from which there would be no return. He thought of Marcelo's embrace, the kind words, the trust placed in him. But the thought lasted less than 3 seconds, because Rafael had crossed that line weeks ago, perhaps months, perhaps years ago, when he decided that his success mattered more than his integrity. He opened the file and began making tiny but devastating changes. He changed some numbers in the financial projections, altered dates in critical timelines, swapped stakeholder names on important slides. Nothing that was obvious at first glance, but everything that would be immediately noticed by the client during the presentation. Each change was surgical, calculated to maximize embarrassment without seeming intentional. After saving the file, he took care to delete any access logs that might link him to the alteration, or so he thought, and went home to sleep peacefully. He slept soundly, without a nightmare, without a single moment of insomnia. After all, corporate psychopaths rarely lose sleep. The presentation was a disaster of epic proportions. Marcelo noticed the errors as soon as he began speaking, when the third slide appeared on the screen and the numbers didn't match what he had memorized. His stomach sank. He tried to correct them verbally, but the further he went, the more errors appeared. The client noticed the inconsistencies within the first 15 minutes. The questions started politely but pointedly, then became progressively harsher, finally turning into accusations. How could a company of that size get such basic information wrong? How could they trust a partnership if even the names of the client's executives weren't correct? The client's vice president, a 60-year-old man with a reputation for not tolerating incompetence, interrupted the presentation on slide 53. "Mr. Marcelo, with all due respect, this is unacceptable. We are considering investing millions with you, and you can't even verify basic information?" Marcelo was sweating, trying to explain, but each attempt at justification sounded like a flimsy excuse, like incompetence trying to disguise itself as bad luck. The meeting ended in palpable discomfort. The client said he needed to seriously reconsider the partnership. Marcelo's team left that room in sepulchral silence, eyes avoiding each other, each person internally processing the disaster they had just witnessed. Rafael, who had asked to attend the presentation, to learn from Marcelo, who had said that morning, "I want to see a master in action," showed such genuine concern that he even offered to stay afterward to help understand what had happened. His eyes showed just the right measure of shock and sympathy. Marcelo thanked him but declined. He needed to be alone, to try to understand how everything had gone so terribly wrong. As he left, Rafael placed his hand on his shoulder again, that now familiar gesture, and whispered, "Don't blame yourself too much. We all make mistakes. The important thing is how we recover from them." Words that sounded comforting, but carried subtle poison, planting the idea that yes, Marcelo was to blame, that it was his mistake. Rafael left the building that afternoon, feeling a deep satisfaction. It was almost done. A few more weeks, and Marcelo's chair would be his. That night, Marcelo didn't go home. He stayed in the empty office, staring at the computer screen, opening and closing the presentation dozens of times. He was certain, absolutely certain, that those errors weren't there when he reviewed everything the night before. He had checked each slide 3 times as he always did. He had sent the final version to 2 senior team members for double-checking. They had confirmed it was perfect. So how? How was it possible? But how to prove it? How to explain to the board that somehow, mysteriously, the presentation had been sabotaged? It would sound like paranoia, like a desperate professional trying to deflect blame. Marcelo buried his face in his hands. 42 years old, 20 years of career, and everything crumbling because of a presentation. It didn't make sense. Absolutely no sense. He called Fernanda, said he needed to stay in the office to resolve the crisis. She heard the defeat in his voice, and her heart tightened. She asked if he was okay, if he needed her to come over. Marcelo said no, that he just needed time to think. He hung up the phone and remained there, alone on the 13th floor, surrounded by the silence of an empty office and the weight of a defeat he couldn't comprehend. At 3 a.m, he finally went home. Fernanda was awake, waiting. She hugged him without saying anything, and Marcelo finally allowed the tears to come. What Marcelo didn't know was that his salvation would come from where he least expected it. Júlia had worked in the company's IT department for 8 years. 39 years old, divorced, mother of 2 teenagers, she was one of those invisible professionals who keep everything running behind the scenes. Nobody noticed Júlia unless something broke. She liked it that way. Less pressure, less drama, less corporate politics. She could do her job, pick up her children from school, live a balanced life. But Júlia had something most people didn't: an insatiable technical curiosity and a photographic memory for patterns. She lived immersed in data, logs, systems. She saw patterns where others saw only random numbers. And she had noticed something strange in the server logs the night before the Titan project presentation. An out-of-hours access, coming from a workstation that theoretically shouldn't have been active at that time. The logs had been deleted, but not completely. Traces always remain when someone isn't as good as they think they are. Júlia didn't give it much importance initially. It could be someone who had returned to pick up something they had forgotten, or a workaholic finishing up tasks. But when she heard about the disaster of Marcelo's presentation the next day, news travels fast in offices. Something clicked in her mind. that small anomaly in the logs, that strange access, those partially deleted records. She had known Marcelo for years. They weren't close. They had barely spoken beyond polite greetings and technical requests. But she observed people. She knew he was meticulous to the point of obsession. She had seen him redo reports 3 times to ensure perfection. He wouldn't make mistakes like that. Not on something so important. Something was wrong. Very wrong. During lunch, Júlia stayed at her station while everyone else went out to nearby restaurants. She said she had brought a packed lunch, that she preferred to eat there. As soon as the floor was empty, she opened the logs again and began to dig deeper. She used forensic recovery tools that most employees didn't even know existed. She checked automatic backups that ran every 3 hours. She cross-referenced information on physical access to the building, security records, with digital access to the servers. It compared timestamps, checked file modification histories, and recovered shadow copy versions that the system automatically maintained. It took 3 hours of intense work, but she found it. Access had been gained by Rafael Silva. His credentials, his workstation, physical record of him entering the building at 10 p.m. And more. She managed to recover a shadow copy version of the Titan project file, showing exactly when and what changes had been made. Each change was timestamped, each modification recorded with second-level precision. The 7 p.m. version, the last one Marcelo had saved, was perfect. The 10:40 p.m. version, after Rafael accessed it, was corrupted with all the errors that had appeared in the presentation. The evidence was so clear that even a jury could understand it. Júlia printed everything, organized it in a physical folder, and also created a pen drive with all the evidence files. And for the first time in 8 years, she made a decision that went against every fiber of her reserved personality. She scheduled a meeting directly with the operations director, Leonardo Carvalho. She didn't go through a manager, didn't ask for permission, didn't follow the hierarchy. She simply opened Leonardo's calendar and scheduled a 1-hour meeting. He put in the title, Corporate Fraud, Urgent and Confidential. Leonardo received her that same afternoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, intrigued by the alarming title. Júlia wasn't one for drama, she wasn't one for alarmism. In 8 years, she had never requested a direct meeting with him. If she said it was urgent, it probably was. She entered the room, closed the door behind her, placed the folder on the table, and said simply, in a voice that trembled slightly but remained firm, "Mr. Leonardo, Project Titan has been sabotaged. I have the proof here. Server logs, timestamps, file versions, physical access records, and I know exactly who did it. Rafael Silva." Leonardo was paralyzed for a full 3 seconds. Then he picked up the folder and began to read. Júlia methodically presented each piece of evidence, explaining in technical but understandable terms how she had discovered everything, how she was absolutely certain it wasn't a system error or a coincidence. She showed the building's entry logs. She showed the partially deleted logs. She showed the 2 versions of the file side by side, with the changes highlighted. The evidence was devastatingly clear. The next 2 hours were a whirlwind. Leonardo immediately called the Human Resources Director, Patricia Mendes, and the company's in-house lawyer, Dr. Augusto Ferreira. Júlia presented everything again, answered technical questions, and explained multiple times how certain she was that the evidence was irrefutable. She showed how Rafael had accessed the system, made the changes, tried to erase the traces but failed because he didn't fully understand how backup systems worked. The lawyer took notes quickly, already thinking about the legal implications, possible lawsuits, and how to protect the company. Patricia turned pale when she understood the magnitude of what had happened. Leonardo clenched his fists, visibly furious. "This is deliberate sabotage," he said, his voice controlled but full of cold rage. "This is criminal. Júlia, are you absolutely sure?" Júlia looked him straight in the eye and said, "Absolutely. I can explain every piece of evidence 20 times and you'll always arrive at the same conclusion. Rafael Silva sabotaged Project Titan with the intention of harming Marcelo. It's all here." They asked Júlia to maintain absolute secrecy while they conducted the internal investigation and prepared the case with the legal team. She agreed and left the room feeling a strange weight on her shoulders. She wasn't one to get involved in trouble. She didn't like being the center of attention. She preferred the safe invisibility of the background. But she couldn't sleep knowing that a good man was being destroyed by someone unscrupulous. She couldn't look at her own children if she didn't do the right thing. That night, Júlia went home, hugged her children tighter than usual, helped them with their homework, prepared their favorite dinner. And she silently thanked them for having instilled in them something that Rafael clearly never had: character, empathy, the ability to distinguish right from wrong, and to choose the right, even when it's most difficult. Before bed, her eldest son asked why she was so quiet. "Just a tough day at work, love," she said, kissing his forehead. "But I did the right thing, so everything's fine." Marcelo was called to a meeting the following morning at 9 o'clock. The email simply said, "Urgent meeting. Leonardo Carvalho, Patricia Mendez, Legal Department." He entered the room expecting to be fired. He was prepared. He had even mentally rehearsed how he would react with dignity. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't make a scene. He would accept, sign whatever was necessary, and leave with his head held high. Leonardo was there, along with Patricia and 2 people from the legal department whom Marcelo didn't know. He sat down, straightened his back, bracing himself for the final blow. Leonardo began by talking about the importance of integrity in the company, about how trust was the foundation of everything. Marcelo listened, thinking this was a cruel prelude to the dismissal, a way to soften the blow. But then Leonardo said something Marcelo didn't expect. "You were the victim of deliberate and premeditated sabotage, Marcelo. We have irrefutable proof." The words took a few seconds to make sense. "Sabotage?" Marcelo blinked, confused. "What?" That was all he could say. Leonardo continued, calmly explaining what Júlia had discovered, showing the printed evidence, detailing how Rafael had orchestrated everything for months. With each word, Marcelo felt a confusing mix of relief, anger, and a deep sadness that physically ached in his chest. Relief at not going crazy, at not having lost his competence, at discovering it wasn't his fault. Anger at the systematic betrayal of someone he had completely trusted, someone he had embraced, advised, treated almost like a professional son. And sadness because he now understood that for months, while he thought he had an ally, that he had someone trustworthy by his side, he actually had an enemy smiling beside him, plotting his destruction. "Rafael?" Marcelo said, his voice hoarse. "Rafael did this? Why? I always tried to help him." Patricia replied gently. "We know, Marcelo. And that's why this is even more serious. You did nothing to deserve this. Nothing." Marcelo felt tears burning his eyes, but not from sadness, from an overwhelming confusion of emotions that he couldn't process. Rafael was called into the room at 10 in the morning. He entered confidently, with the gait of someone about to receive good news. He thought they would finally receive the news of the promotion he had so desired, that Marcelo had already been removed, and that his position was finally vacant. He saw Marcelo sitting there, and felt a pang of irritation. Why was he still there? He should have already been fired, removed, eliminated from the team. But he kept a neutral, smiling face. Leonardo didn't waste any time. He didn't even offer him a position. He placed the evidence on the table like a prosecutor presenting evidence, and asked directly, "Rafael, do you have anything to say about this?" Pointing to the documents. Rafael looked at the papers, saw the logs, the timestamps, the screenshots. He felt the blood drain from his face, but he tried to deny it, of course. This is absurd," he said, trying to sound indignant. "I would never do something like that. It must be a system error. Júlia must be mistaken." But as Leonardo presented each piece of evidence with methodical patience, the logs, the timestamps, the physical access records, even the security recordings from the building entrance showing Rafael returning alone that night with his badge clearly visible, his facade began to crack. His hands trembled. His voice lost its strength. He then tried to change his strategy, saying he was only trying to help, that he had seen the errors and tried to correct them, that he must have made a mistake when modifying the file. a desperate and contradictory lie that convinced no one in that room. Patricia interrupted him and said coldly, each word cutting like a blade, "You are dismissed for just cause. Effective immediately. You will have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings under security supervision. Your access to the systems has already been revoked. We are also evaluating appropriate legal measures for corporate sabotage and damage to reputation." Rafael's face lost all color. He looked at Marcelo, perhaps searching for some trace of compassion, some intervention on his behalf, some remnant of the kindness he had exploited for months. Marcelo simply stared at him in silence. And in that look there was no anger. There was disappointment, the most painful kind of judgment. There was also a silent question. Why? I trusted you. Why? But Marcelo said nothing aloud. There were no words. Rafael tried to speak. Marcelo, But his voice died in the air. What could he say? Apologies would be an insult. Explanations would be pathetic. He lowered his eyes and left the room, escorted by the security that was already waiting outside. When Rafael left the room, escorted by security, Marcelo remained seated, still processing everything. His hands trembled slightly. Leonardo formally apologized on behalf of the company, said they would take systemic measures to ensure that something like this never happened again. He offered Marcelo a few weeks of paid leave to recover from the traumatic stress. Marcelo thanked him, but said he preferred to continue working. Staying home would only make him overthink, ruminate, relive everything repeatedly. What he really needed was to salvage Project Titan, fix the damage, and prove to himself and the client that this didn't define him as a professional. Leonardo smiled, saying he expected exactly that response, that this was why Marcelo was the manager he was. He said the company would contact the client that very day, explaining the entire situation with complete transparency. In the following days, Marcelo worked tirelessly to recover the project. He redid the presentation with even more care, included extra security and verification measures, and added layers of review. And he managed to get a second meeting with the client. This time, he began the meeting with something he never imagined doing. He told the whole story. He explained the sabotage, the evidence, how the company had handled the case. He put everything on the table with a vulnerability that surprised even himself. And the client, that 60-year-old vice president who had interrupted the first presentation with disdain, remained silent for long seconds. Then he said, "Mr. Marcelo, thank you for your honesty. This says more about your company and about you than any presentation. Let's review the material." The presentation went perfectly. The client, impressed not only by the quality of the work, but also by how the company had handled the crisis internally, decided not only to maintain the partnership, but to expand it. "It's rare to see a company act with integrity when things go wrong," the vice president said at the end. "You have our trust." And Júlia, the IT woman no one noticed, who walked invisibly through the hallways, received a substantial bonus and public recognition at the company's general meeting. She blushed with embarrassment at the attention, tried to downplay her contribution, but Marcelo made a point of standing up and shaking her hand personally, loud enough for all 200 employees present to hear. "You saved my career and my sanity. You saved the reputation of 20 years of work. I will be eternally grateful, Júlia. Eternally." Júlia simply nodded, unable to speak, tears silently streaming down her face. Later, in the parking lot, Marcelo caught up with her before she got into her car. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "You don't know me. You owe me nothing." Júlia looked at him and said simply, "Because it was the right thing to do, and because my children need to know that their mother is not a coward." Marcelo embraced the woman he barely knew, and they both cried there, under the parking lot lights, two strangers connected by an act of moral courage that had changed everything. Months later, Marcelo was at home on a Sunday afternoon, having coffee on the porch, while watching his daughter play in the yard with the dog they had recently adopted. The sun was perfect, that golden hue of a late autumn afternoon. Fernanda sat beside him, placed her hand on his, and asked if he still thought about what had happened. Marcelo was silent for a moment, watching his daughter laugh as the dog jumped trying to catch a ball. Then he said yes, but not in the way she imagined. He said the episode had taught him something fundamental about trust and human nature, that there are people in the world willing to destroy others to get what they want, and that this is a reality against which there is no perfect defense. That kindness can be exploited, trust can be betrayed, and that there are individuals who see relationships only as tools for their own ends. But he had also taught him that there are people like Júlia, who do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do, without expecting anything in return, without seeking recognition or reward. People who risk their comfort zone on principle, not for personal gain. That the truth, however much it tries to be buried, has a peculiar stubbornness in emerging. Like water finding cracks in a dam, the eventual truth flows. And that 20 years of honest work and relationships built on integrity create an invisible safety net. Because when the crisis came, it was these relationships that saved him. It was the people who truly knew him, who knew his character, who refused to believe he was incompetent. Rafael had managed to sabotage projects, but he hadn't managed to destroy the reputation Marcelo had built over 2 decades, brick by brick, interaction by interaction. And perhaps that was the most important lesson. That character isn't built in months of calculated performance, but in years of consistent actions when no one is watching. "I couldn't do what Rafael did," Marcelo said, shaking Fernanda's hand. "And I'm grateful for that. I'd rather be me than him, even after everything." Marcelo never heard directly from Rafael again. He heard rumors through his professional network that Rafael had tried to get jobs at other companies in the sector. But that news of his dismissal for fraud had discreetly spread among recruiters. This kind of information always leaks, always circulates in private conversations between HR managers. That he was working in a completely different area now, something in retail sales, starting from scratch at 35, rebuilding his life and career from the beginning. Marcelo felt no satisfaction with this, only a distant sadness for the wasted talent and opportunity that Rafael represented. Because Rafael was intelligent, genuinely intelligent. He had real technical skills, analytical ability, energy. If he had channeled half the energy he used in sabotage into genuine work, into building instead of destroying, he probably would have gone far on his own merit. Perhaps not as quickly as he wanted, but he would have arrived with dignity, with a clean reputation, with peaceful sleep. But he had chosen the shortcut. And shortcuts on moral roads always lead to the precipice, always end in a fall. The real tragedy wasn't Rafael being caught. It wasn't the dismissal or the tarnished reputation. The real tragedy was that he never seemed to understand that he was destroying himself far more than Marcelo. Because Marcelo had something Rafael would never have, no matter how many promotions he got or how many rungs he climbed. The ability to sleep peacefully at night, knowing that his achievements were legitimate. That his success wasn't built on the emotional wounds of others. And that, in the end, was worth more than any promotion obtained through betrayal. It was worth more than any corporate title tainted by dishonesty. The story of Marcelo and Rafael isn't just about corporate sabotage and its discovery. It's not just about villain and victim, about good and evil in their simplest forms. It's about the choices we make when no one is watching, about the kind of person we decide to be when ambition finds the opportunity for a shortcut. We live in a world that often celebrates results without questioning methods, that confuses cunning with wisdom, that values rapid ascent without measuring the human cost of that climb. A world that asks, "Did you succeed?" before asking, "How did you succeed?" and that frequently ignores the second question altogether. Rafael represents something that exists in many work environments, perhaps all. The belief that the ends justify the means, that being successful is more important than being good, that character is a luxury that only failures can afford. He saw Marcelo not as a person with a family, dreams, years of dedication, and a heart beating with fears and hopes. He saw only an obstacle to be removed, a piece of corporate furniture in the wrong place. And in this dehumanization of the other, in this reduction of a human being to a mere impediment, Rafael lost something of his own humanity. He became less than he could have been. Júlia represents something we often forget to value until we desperately need it. The courage to do the right thing even when it would be easier and safer to remain invisible. She had nothing to gain by exposing Rafael. Absolutely nothing. She could have simply ignored the strange logs, filed away that small anomaly as just another unimportant technical curiosity, and continued with her quiet, predictable life. No one would know. No one would judge her. But she chose to act because her moral compass wouldn't allow her to watch an injustice in silence. Because there was something inside her. Perhaps planted by parents who taught her about right and wrong. Perhaps forged by her own experiences of injustice. That simply couldn't turn her back on someone being unjustly destroyed. And that choice, that silent courage of a woman no one noticed, changed everything. She saved a career, exposed a corporate criminal, restored justice where there was betrayal. Júlia is the kind of heroine the world needs more and celebrates less. The ordinary person who does the extraordinary not for glory, but out of principle. And Marcelo? He learned that kindness isn't naivete, that trusting people isn't weakness. He learned that it's possible to be good in a world that isn't always good, but that it's necessary to balance openness with discernment, trust with healthy vigilance. It's not about becoming paranoid or cynical. That would be Rafael's victory, turning Marcelo into someone closed off and distrustful. It's about recognizing that not everyone deserves unrestricted access to your trust, that some people show who they are through small signs that we must learn to read. Marcelo learned that the world contains both Rafaels and Júlias, predators and protectors, destroyers and builders, and that our responsibility is not only to avoid the former, but to be more like the latter. That each interaction is a choice between adding light or shadow to the world, between building or destroying, between helping or sabotaging. Ultimately, each of us carries this choice every day when we wake up and decide how we will interact with the world. Between being the person who opens doors for others or the one who closes them. Between being the one who shares credit or steals recognition. Between strengthening teams or undermining colleagues. Between building a reputation through honest work or through the destruction of others. And this choice, repeated thousands of times throughout a lifetime, in small decisions that no one sees, and great moments that everyone witnesses, determines not only our career or professional success, but fundamentally who we are when we look in the mirror. It determines whether we can sleep peacefully or whether we carry the invisible weight of betrayals we thought forgotten. It determines whether we build something real or just a facade that eventually crumbles. In the end, it determines whether we lived a life worth living. Rafael chose a path and paid the price, not just with the dismissal or the tarnished reputation. Those are external consequences that hurt but pass. The real price was internal, invisible, but devastating. It was the loss of something that, once lost, may never be fully recovered. Integrity, the ability to genuinely take pride in one's achievements, the peace of mind that comes from knowing you deserved what you have. Rafael will have to live the rest of his life knowing that the only time it truly mattered, when he was tested and had to choose between character and convenience, he chose the latter. And that choice defines him more than any professional title he could have achieved. Marcelo, on the other hand, emerged from that experience not broken, but forged. Emotional scars remained. He never again trusted in the same blind way, never again automatically assumed that everyone around him had good intentions. But he didn't become cynical. He became wise. He learned the difference. He remained kind, but with clearer boundaries. He remained a mentor, but observing more attentively. And he continued to believe that most people are good, but recognizing that most doesn't mean all. This nuance, this balance between trust and caution, between openness and protection, is perhaps the most valuable wisdom one can gain from surviving betrayal. And Júlia? Júlia returned to her quiet life, to her chosen invisibility. But now she carried something precious, the certainty that when she mattered, when she was tested, when she had to choose between security and courage, she chose courage. Her children will one day know this story, and they will understand that their mother is not just the woman who prepares dinner and helps with homework. She is also the woman who stood up against injustice when it would have been easier to remain silent. And this, more than any formal lesson, will teach them about the kind of person they should aspire to be. 3 lives, 3 choices, 3 destinies, an interwoven tapestry of morality, consequence, and redemption. a story that repeats itself in thousands of offices, in millions of human interactions every day. The only question that remains is, when your turn comes, when you are in the position of Rafael, Marcelo, or Júlia, who will you choose to be? The answer to this question determines not only your next professional step, it determines who you are in the deepest essence of your being. And that, in the end, is the only choice that truly matters. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that true stories about choices, character, and consequences deserve to be told, please consider subscribing to the channel. Each subscription tells me that you value content that goes beyond the superficial, that explores the complexity of human nature. Together, we can create a community that celebrates not only the drama, but the profound lessons these stories carry. Your support means I can continue bringing you narratives that make you reflect, feel, and perhaps see the world a little differently.